Good evening. My name is Leslie Harris, and I am your proud president of the Seattle School Board. Welcome to our house. My beloved daughter is a proud graduate of Sealth International High School and is a Seahawk. One of the proudest moments of my professional career, and certainly my political activist and community organizing career, is the fact that last Wednesday night, with the help of many of the young people in this room, your Seattle School Board passed a resolution against gun violence in our schools, 7-0. Co-sponsored, 7-0. It's been on the wire. It's gone all over the country, and I could not be prouder to live in this city with y'all. It's our pleasure tonight to introduce Natalie Brand and Ross Reynolds, who will be moderating Mayor Durkin's town hall. Natalie Brand is an Emmy Award-winning political reporter at King 5. You've seen her on the news hundreds of times, where she covers state, local, and national politics and policies. She's worked in Seattle for the past 3 years, but her reporting career has taken her from Southern California to Portland, Oregon, and Phoenix, Arizona, as well as Boston, where she received a Master's of Public Administration from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Ross Reynolds, who you've heard on the radio for lots of years, and we thank you for your esteemed career, is KUOW's executive producer for community engagement. Before that, he was a KUOW program host for 16 years. Ross was news director at KBOO Radio in Portland, Oregon, and news public affairs director at WCUW Radio in Worcester, Massachusetts. He's a graduate of Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, and the University of Washington, go Huskies, Department of Communication, Masters in Digital Media program. Again, welcome to our house. This violence has to stop. And the teachers in the Seattle Public Schools, and we hope in the nation, will not be armed. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie, for the introduction. Thank you to all of you for having us here tonight, and to Mayor Durkin. It's an honor to be here, and I look forward to the conversation ahead. This is designed to be a community discussion where a panel of experts and educators will be answering as many of your questions as we have time for tonight.
So we're using an interactive Q&A platform. It's called Pigeonhole. Some of you on your phones can access that to ask your questions. You also have forms to fill out to pass to the aisles in order for those questions to go into that. Questions for Mayor Durkin and our panel of speakers, so you'll be introduced to in a moment. The focus on this conversation is going to be in 5 different areas: school violence, race and justice, public health crisis and approach, state and federal actions, and then local efforts, like we just heard about from the school board.
And we'll be directing those questions to Mayor Durkin, as well as the panelists that we'll introduce in a minute. As Ross mentioned, many of you have already submitted questions, but if you have another question or a new question during the town hall, you can go to www.pigeonhole.at. It's on the big screen behind me. Just go there on your smartphone, type in the event passcode "End Gun Violence," all one word, and then enter your first name, school if you're a student, and of course your question. You can also vote for any questions that interest you or that you want answered, and we'd like to keep this conversation going on Twitter. Use the hashtag #SeeGunViolence in your posts.
And I'd like to now welcome our 5 guests to the stage tonight, each bringing a unique perspective to this issue, including our mayor, a student, an educator, a doctor, and a community advocate. Joining us on the stage tonight, the 56th mayor of Seattle, Jenny Durkan. She's both represented victims of gun violence and prosecuted people for violating gun laws. As U.S. Attorney, one of her top priorities has been increasing gun prosecutions, including illegal possession of sales, particularly at gun shows.
Mayor Durkin will be joined by Nyla Fritz, principal of Einstein Middle School. Fritz has also served as assistant principal in the Everett School District. Prior to that, she worked in the Bellevue School District for 9 years. Principal Fritz knows this issue all too well, all too personally. Her 14-year-old brother Arnie was killed in a school shooting in her hometown of Moses Lake, and because of that tragedy, she decided to focus her education and professional life on working with and helping youth.
Also with us, Gregory Pleasant is a junior at Rainier Beach High School. He's also a student leader at the Urban Family Center, a community-based organization. He's also part of Youth for Peace tonight, and he's got some fans in the audience.
Also joining us tonight, Dr. Frederick Rivera, who is a University of Washington professor of pediatrics and adjunct professor of epidemiology. Dr. Rivera has devoted his career to studying childhood injury and injury prevention, and his contributions in the field span 3 decades. He served as founding director of the Harborview Injury and Research Center in Seattle for 13 years, where he's been a leader in studying public health impacts of gun violence in our community.
And our final panelist this evening, Carbon Martinez is the Youth Program Direct Coordinator at the Duwamish Valley Youth Corps. She's worked in youth development for 18 years. Carmen's a proud mom of 1 son, but she likes to say she's also mom to more than 1,000 kids in the neighborhood.
So thank you, panelists. Each of our panelists will be giving a brief introduction before we jump into your questions. But we also want to acknowledge and welcome some special guests in the audience who will be staying as well to answer questions or talk to you if you would like to meet with them after this event. We have Seattle Council Member Lisa Herbold, Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best, Public Health Director Patty Hayes, Superintendent Dr. Larry Nyland, School Board President Leslie Harris, who you heard from a few minutes ago, and King County Council Member Joe McDermott. Thank you for being here.
So let's go to a question that actually pertains to what the mayor mentioned just a moment ago. What does the recently passed resolution to end gun violence in Seattle Public Schools say specifically, and what changes does it put in place? Would someone like to take that one?
On the school resolution?
Yes.
Maybe we can direct that to the school board member who was here before. We've got the long resolution with us and we could read it. But generally what it says is they really understand that it is time to end the violence in schools. And we must draw a line to show that schools are a place for learning, for education, for love, and that we cannot have guns in schools. They do not want to arm teachers, and they want to make sure that we do what we need to do to support our students in every part of their life, in the classroom and outside of the classroom.
And that, ladies and gents, is why she's our mayor. There's another piece to this, though, and it's about funding. It's about funding enough counselors. It's about education being a holistic system where we address things like social, emotional learning, where we accept all comers and we are kind to each other, and we learn that violence is not the answer.
So the question with the most votes currently, from what I can tell, will Seattle be taking an interest in preventative legislation in addition to retroactive legislation? So of course I'd like to hear from Mayor Durkin, but also experts on our panel about what that could look like, particularly Dr. Rivera.
Yep, I think it's a great question, and I think the absolute answer is yes. I want to tell you that Seattle wants to do everything it can on preventive violence. It is clear that Washington, D.C. is not going to act. It unfortunately seems to be clear that Olympia will not act. And unfortunately, cities are prohibited under state law from taking most actions that will act. But we will do what we can, and we will continue to push Olympia to give us the powers to protect our children and our communities, and to do those things we know we need to do to keep kids safe. There's a whole range of things that we're going to have people talking about on this panel that we know on a community basis, in the school basis, that work. So we have to do all the thing that's community-based, but we also have to do, as grown-ups, make sure we have the right laws in place so that, for example, I personally believe we need an assault weapons ban. We also know that too many people die of gun violence either by accident or by suicide. And so we need better strategies to help those people in distress, and we absolutely need laws around safe storage so kids can't get access to guns. But we want to make this interactive. I'd like the student to talk about some of the things that you think that the city needs to be doing so students feel safe.
Honestly, in my opinion, it comes down to two things. It's motive and means to an end. If these guns are not readily available for people to use, then regardless of the problems, these situations will not happen. And as well as, you can't just demonize these people, because you must look at the situations and the environments that they are living in where they feel like this is necessary. If I leave my house every day and I feel like if I don't have a gun on me, that I could maybe not walk back in that door, like that's gonna change the way I live completely. Especially in my neighborhood, like it's not just guns at school. While that is always a valid topic because every human life is valid, it's am I gonna get shot when I walk down the street? Can I go to the store? Like, can I go to practice and not have to worry about walking home 9 o'clock at night and possibly getting harassed?
Could you tell them a little bit about the t-shirt you're wearing today?
The t-shirt I'm wearing today has a simple question. Who's next?
Because really, the only notable things that anyone ever really talks about in our neighborhoods are either someone went to college or someone got killed. And we need it to be more of the positive and not become so used to just the negative.
So Mayor Durkin mentioned this. I think it's important to realize that here in the state of Washington, 75% of the gun deaths are suicides. 75%. We focus a lot on the assaults, on the risks to all of us from whether we're walking down the streets or coming into an assembly. But I think
Hold the mic a little bit
Hold it
closer
a
to your
little
mouth.
I think it's
Yeah.
important to remember that 75% of the gun deaths in the state of Washington are suicides. And for that, we can't totally get rid of guns. I mean, they're here. We have the Second Amendment. But one thing we can do is to make sure that any gun that's around, whether it be in our homes or our friends' homes or our neighbors' homes or where our kids go to visit, is that it's properly stored. That's something we all can do and something we really should do.
You know, on that, that's a great point. Let's give you a hand for that. In Seattle alone last year, there were over 250 guns stolen in Seattle. Those are guns that end up on the streets, in the wrong hands, doing the wrong things. I want to pivot to a little bit off Rainier Beach and talk a little bit, Carmen, if you could talk maybe a little bit about South Park and that same feeling about community and how they can pull together about when they're fearful and what it means when we should say the name, Dallas Esparza was killed in South Park, 16 years old, and how that affects the youth and what we can do.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. So, as she mentioned, we lost a youth a couple of weeks ago. Actually, he passed away February 17th, and it's very tragic. The school shooting, in the media was very scary for youth to begin with, and then to have an actual homicide in your community really has frightened the youth in South Park. I've been working down in South Park for many years. This isn't the first homicide that we've had. We've had multiple homicides. We've been dealing with this. But, I want to kind of echo on a few things that people have said here. The access to weapons is really, has got to stop. We got to figure out a way how young people are accessing weapons. We got to figure out a proactive approach, and that to me sounds like education and programs for kids that are young, because by the time they're in middle school and high school, they're already making decisions on whether they're carrying or the crowd that they're in are carrying weapons. So it's got to be a proactive approach. It's got to be education. We're missing the piece about education, educating young people on guns, you know, the danger of guns and having guns. It's great, you know, we're not taking anybody's amendments away. They have a right to bear arms, but how to be responsible. And that's another real important key. But I work a lot with the youth in the South Park area, and I ask them all the time, and you would be surprised the number of kids that have a gun, that are carrying, or have access to a weapon. It is very, very scary. And the same thing, they say they have to carry it so that they feel safe, because just recently we had a couple of young men, a car drove up right next to them and had shotgun pulled right on them. And so, you know, you young people should not have to go to school and be afraid, and you surely should not have to walk down your neighborhood and be afraid. So, yeah, it's the same thing.
I was going to say I would love to hear from you, but also from Principal Fritz about if education and prevention is part of the solution, then what does that look like from a school educator and administrative perspective?
I've been an educator for 18 years, and I became an educator to teach history and to teach kids, not to teach gun awareness. I've waited 22 years since my brother was killed to have some of these conversations about common sense legislation come to the forefront. And I look out here right now and I'm seeing all of these young people, and what I have to say to you is two things. One, I'm sorry, and two, thank you. I'm sorry that the adults have failed you. And thank you for being the voice right now, standing up to say, we deserve to walk into our schools feeling safe. We deserve to walk down our streets feeling safe. And we need to listen to our children who are telling us, this is what that looks like, and adults, listen to us. This is what we need. So thank you for that. As an educator, there are things that we can do, that all schools can do to make schools feel safer, the way we interact with one another, how we talk to kids, and creating safe environments. When I hear a lot of conversation right now about arming teachers or the security measures that people are talking about to make schools feel safe, there's a misnomer there. Safety and security are two different things, and I really worry about some of the language that I'm hearing that is wanting to have our schools turn into places with such high security that it feels like a prison. And kids need to come to school and feel safe and have fun and roam their halls and not wonder. I was listening to some of the students backstage say, I get worried when I walk into an assembly, and I'm thinking, where's the nearest door? That is wrong. And more security measures, metal detectors and guards don't necessarily make that safe. What we need is for the adults to take action, to say we're going to prevent that access to those weapons, because there's a common denominator in a lot of this, and that is access. As my friend here was saying, it's the access that adults and kids have to those weapons, and that is something that we can do that is actionable.
The question that at the top of the list right now with 18 votes is this one. There are those who say that guns don't kill people, people kill people. How is the mental health component of gun violence being addressed? And Dr. Rivera, maybe you could start this answer.
Well, the first statement is wrong. Guns kill people. Mental health is mentally ill people only account for about 3% of homicides in the United States. 3%. And most mentally ill people are not violent. They're not at risk of harming other people. We don't have the greatest mental health system here in the city of Seattle, the state of Washington, or the United States. I work at Harborview. I have a patient right now in the hospital waiting a mental health bed. We don't have enough mental health beds for our youth. That's a problem that we as a society really need to address. But the problem is really trying to get help for people that need the help. It's not the idea that we're going to remove the violent offender from the street by locking them up in a mental hospital. That's not really where it's at. We need to take care of people. We need to provide them the help that they need to become mentally healthy, but not focus on treatment of mental illness as the president and other people would want us to believe that's the solution to our gun violence problem. It really isn't.
You know, I'd like to follow up on that because I think it's exactly right. I think that some ways the people who are against any kind of gun control are trying to make this simple choices. You know, it's not guns that kill people, it's people that do. And there's no one-size-fits-all solution. You know, we don't want to stigmatize people with mental health issues. We want to make sure that they get the help they need and the steps we take don't reduce that. But we also want to be smart so that we have things like we have in Seattle now, the extreme risk protection orders, so that people are suffering from a severe disability or mental health and they're a danger to themselves, we can get an order to go get their gun from them, to take away that risk. And I'm proud that Chief Best, under her leadership and others, the city of Seattle has done that over 20 times and taken those guns away from people who might be a risk to themselves or others. You know, that's a great step. And we have to make sure people are aware they can do that, because almost all the referrals we've had so far have come from law enforcement. You know, families have to know that that's an option. Teachers have to know. People in the church have to know that they can give that protection to someone that's temporary. It won't take away their constitutional rights, but gives them some protection. The other thing we have to understand is going back to being able to safe in your neighborhoods. We know strategies that can disrupt violence in neighborhoods. We know what works. And there's community organizations doing it day in and day out. And what we have to decide as a city and as a country is whether we will empower those kind of organizations that will disrupt that violence and give the youth an opportunity so there's not this choice, or we're going to continue down the same path. And I think that's the dialogue we have to have in the city of Seattle, is how do we empower those organizations and groups and youth? And so talking about violence as a neighborhood and trying to say there's going to be one size that makes people safe there and also will deter the shootings that are in high schools. And we all know that if someone walked into a high school without a semi-automatic weapon that fired high-velocity bullets at 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 in a row, there'd be a different result. You know, and Dr. Rivera, I'm sure you can talk about this. There was a really good article about the emergency room doctor in Parkland who treated the wounded and had been in the emergency room for a long time and had treated gunshot victims many times, including a shooting at an airport where there was a mass shooting. But that was a mass shooting with a 9mm versus the AR-15. And the damage done by assault weapon is just different from a handgun. And assault weapons are weapons of war. They have no business being in civilian hands.
So you all are high school students. Remember physics. Energy is equal to 1/2 mass times velocity squared.
We remember that, right?
So the reason I bring it up is that with an assault rifle, the velocity there is about 2 to 4 times higher than with a handgun. And since that relationship is squared, that increase in velocity results in a huge amount of increase in energy to that bullet as it enters the body, and that's why it kills.
So we have another question, and it's kind of, I guess I'll bring in a little bit of politics into it, because Mayor Durkan, as you mentioned, current efforts in Olympia for an enhanced background check on assault weapons has stalled. So, you know, despite current national debate and debate at the statewide level, what can Seattle do locally to help prevent gun violence?
So we have a range of options, but I want to turn it around a little bit. How many of you in the audience, how many of you students are 17 or 18? All right. How many of you are 16 or 17? So Seattle and Washington State just passed a Voting Rights Act. If you're 16 or 17, you get a pre-register to vote. And when you're 18, you get a vote. I want all of you to stand up, if you're really willing to stand up for these principles and vote when you can vote. Stand up if you mean it. Because we will stand with you. Because in the city of Seattle, we've already done some things that have helped and have worked, and we will do more. We're looking at what we can do in the area of safe storage. We're looking at how we can increase, you know, information so people know they can get those emergency, the protective orders we just talked about. But we're going to look at a whole range of things in terms of, you know, we've already taxed ammunition. So that, you know, we did that not to regulate guns, but to get money to fund public safety. And I'm happy to announce tonight that I'll be asking the City Council, the Seattle City Council, it was upheld by the state Supreme Court that our tax of ammunition and guns was legal. We can now use that money, and we're going to continue to use that money to fund the research, to get the healthcare information, so we know exactly what we need to do to disrupt things. We have a program right now through Harborview where gunshot victims, when they come in, we know from the studies and the data, it's clear. It is likely that they will be involved in other incidents. So we want to get them at that moment and say, what can we do? What can we do for you in school, in your family, in your health? How do we disrupt that? We've had a number of people enroll in that. We're going to be able to enroll more, because I'm going to ask the City Council to dedicate that $100,000 into the future every year so that we can help those kids when they come into the ER the first time.
Thank you very much. And just it's important to note that the city of Seattle was the first city in the country to fund gun research.
This next question comes from R. Joseph, and I think it really pertains to all of us here tonight. R. Josephs wrote, I was involved in a situation recently where another student threatened this type of violence against our school. I didn't know how to handle the situation. How will we be taught better in the future?
Whoever asked that question, thank you. Those are the kinds of things that the adults need to hear, because I think most educators believe, because we tell students, here's what you do, that every single student really understands these are the steps that I need to take in those situations. And you're right, our schools and our youth organizations and our parents need to do a better job of taking kids seriously and teaching our kids to take things seriously. When you see someone post on their story something that makes you worried, are you thinking as a 17-year-old you need to handle it yourself, or are you reporting that to your school counselor, to a trusted adult, to an administrator? And in our schools, is there that kind of trust with an adult that you feel, I have someone I can turn to say that? So whoever asked that question, thank you. I do think we can do a better job. And to our students, to our young people, and to our parents, we need to continue to send the message that there is no joke when it comes to any of these situations with threats, that they have to be taken seriously and that they have to be reported.
I'd like to have a follow-up from both Gregory and Carmen. Gregory, if you heard a threat like this, do you know what you would do? And for Carmen, over the years, have you heard any reports of this from any of the young people you've worked with? Gregory?
Personally, I would review it on a case-by-case basis, because I feel like I would be able to make my own discretions in the situation. But 90% of the people I know, they're not going to say anything. It's not their business. It's not their problem. They're not serious. You hear all those types of things. And it's just, as a society, like, we've become so much into, it's only about the singular. We only need to worry about ourselves. It's a community thing, because otherwise, like, that's why these people are feeling like this. Like, no one's gonna go out and shoot their peers if they feel like they're in a space where they're respected, they have a voice, and like they can go about their lives. So I guess we don't really have a built-in way that we could let someone know. I wouldn't know. Yeah. If I really felt honest, like, I wouldn't know. Go tell the principal, that's about it. Like, it's not something we talk about in classrooms. It's maybe something that we need to.
Mm-hmm. Carmen, do students feel, or young people feel able to talk about it?
Well, so again, working down in South Park, where we've had multiple shootings, multiple homicides with youth violence. Yes, I think again, I'm going to go back to the education of this and giving youth, those mentors in the communities, an option to come. I tell the kids all the time, when anything, they are free to come and talk to me about it. You know, I think we need more mentorship going on. City of Seattle, we have 26 community centers plus ELCs and other avenues where people work with youth. We need to start utilizing that. Schools, we have, I don't know, 12 high schools in the city of Seattle. So we need to start getting 14 high schools and how many middle schools. We need to start building mentorship programs so that the youth feel confidence in coming to us and asking us for help, because in a confidential way. You know, we would never throw you guys under the bus if you came to us, at least me, in a confidential way. The other big thing about this that we didn't really talk a whole lot about is that when there is a shooting, there is more than likely going to be, at least in the South Park area that we know, is going to be some type of retaliation shooting going on. It's a gang war. There's a lot of that going on. And, you know, we have to become proactive and understand it. And again, it goes back to the education of it, you know, knowing what's going to happen next, and then putting safeguards into those places, like, you know, communicating with the police, having options for kids, as I mentioned, to go and talk to a reliable mentor. We just really need to bring that back. I know years ago, we still have the Seattle Youth Violence Prevention Initiative. We used to have teen development leaders in community centers that kids were able to go and talk to. And I think some of this, we need to go back to that so that we can start letting the kids understand that we are adults, that we are there for them. And, you know, statistics show that when kids have a reliable mentor that they can go and they can talk to, you know, it'll help move them away from taking action.
Have kids ever come to you
Absolutely.
and said, I'm really, and what do you do if a young person comes to you and says, this friend of mine is saying stuff that worries me?
Absolutely, that happens all the time, and it happens also hypothetically, but you know, what we do is we sit down with them, we talk to them, we try to let them understand what the consequences are. Then, you know, it is my responsibility to talk to the parent. And then ultimately, you know, we have a huge ally in South Park, and that's Lieutenant Diaz. I'm going to call him out over there. You know, he can help navigate. You know, the kids a lot of times don't say, it's me, but they put it in a hypothetic. You know, oh, I know somebody that, you know, and we try to work with those and then keep a really close guard on that youth. Like, get them involved in something, find a job for them, get them so that they're kind of distracted from the issue, but we're keeping a great eye on that person. But, you know, it's going to take a community. You know the old saying, it takes a village, and it really does. At one point, there were almost a decade where we didn't have a shooting in South Park. where we had programs, where we had, you know, resources for the kids. We had a couple of full-time officers that were always there, and we were able to help the situation. And then once the funding and those resources ended, here we are again in South Park. Here we go.
If I could touch on also what she said, how it's like not just with school shootings, but with gang violence and gun violence and like a lot of inner city communities, it's the lack of opportunities. It's the fact that like not just I'm a 16-year-old kid. What can I go do? Like, is there a community center that I can go to? Are there programs that are going to take me and show me new things that I've never seen before? Or is my idea of entertainment hanging out with my cousins and who are older, who might be in any number of different things, who like obviously don't have the cognizance and the forethought. It's like, okay, whatever I'm bringing this younger element around is going to affect them, and that's really how it gets perpetuated. As well as like, honestly, like a gun in most of in the neighborhoods where I've grown up in is a tool. Like it's like you use it to protect yourself. You can use it to feed yourself. You can use it for a multitude of different reasons. The number one reason is not always just to kill people, but it's the fact that like because of all these things that we have wrong in our society, that like people even feel like that's necessary. The fact that we don't have enough jobs, the fact that it just don't have enough jobs, don't have enough resources, it just puts so much stress on a society. And then you add guns and drugs and all that. It's just a pressure cooker. Like what else do you expect?
Yeah. You know, I want to thank him for being so courageous to be able to say what so many people are thinking. And it's a reality, too, that we as a city and we and adults have to know is that, you know, there's commonalities between the school violence and community-based violence. But what we know also, particularly in community-based violence in Southeast and Southwest Seattle, is the lack of opportunity is a huge part. And we also have to realize that it is driven by decades of systemic racism and cultural unawareness, and that until we have people who look like the youth, who are mentoring them, talking to them, available to them, showing them that they can succeed, we won't change it. And I think it's one reason why, you know, we have our best program where we have a goal of getting, you know, many hundreds of black men mentors to mentor black youth, and so that they can say to them as credible messengers, hey, come on, let's go here, let's do that. And then we as a city, the number one thing we have to do is really deliver on that promise of opportunity. Wherever you're born in Seattle, wherever you're born, whoever your family is, you should be able to do anything you want in this city. And so that's our job as grown-ups. And then for the kids who are lucky enough to live in those neighborhoods where that isn't happened, but they're still afraid in their schools, we have to take other steps to make sure that they're safe. And the common thread between them is access to weapons. We have to have less access to weapons.
So if we can go back to the schools, I'm wondering, is there a current threat assessment or risk evaluation protocol policies in place at schools, district-wide? Is it individual schools implementing different policies? I'm just wondering how that works.
Yeah, I mean, the sad reality is it is. Every single school has protocols and drills and active shooters. And I tell you, since Parkland, they've been thinking about it more, talking about it more, and practicing more. And I will tell you, as a mayor, it is one of those things, the call that you hope you never get. You know, we had one at Seattle Pacific University not too recently, but we've had schools locked down. We had the community college recently locked down. A good friend of mine's daughter went to school in the morning to go to school and ended up locked down in a classroom, not knowing whether she's going to come out alive. So the sad reality is we have to have the protocols, But we also have to do this and have this kind of conversation we've been talking about, because talking to some of the students before this started is, they're afraid at assemblies now. So if you have the assembly to talk about what are we going to do if there's an active shooting situation and practice the drills, it heightens people's insecurity and fears. And so we are going to have more honest conversations in smaller groups and drills. I mean, I don't know what you think about that in your school.
And I guess while you're thinking, I would also add on an audience question. This is from another Natalie. And she asks if there need to be more rules in place for mental health professionals to be in schools and allowing for SPS budgets to actually hire them.
Yes. You know, our schools should be places that are kind of community hubs, and we're still dealing with fully funded public schools, and we do need more resources to respond to our students and their needs. We do need mental health professionals in the schools. I heard a student backstage talking about that at their school they have a community health clinic. That's wonderful, but that is not present in all of our schools. And going back to what Mayor Durkan said, and I can't stress this enough, there are things that we need to do at schools, and schools can't do it all. We just can't do it all, and we need our lawmakers, we need our community members here to stand up and demand of our lawmakers that they want change. We look at some things that have been mentioned already tonight: extreme risk protection orders, background checks. Both of those things went through the initiative process because the lawmakers wouldn't vote on it, okay? That's shameful. That's their job, is to make laws. And the fact that this has to go through the initiative process, the fact that right now there's a bill that could have moved and it's not, that is shameful. So when I look out here at like I said, to the young people who are here saying we need to do something, you know, you're voting in a couple of years. Your voices need to continue to be heard, to say, hey, all of you right now who refuse to vote on this, I'm voting pretty soon. What are you going to stand up and say? What are you going to come out and be for or be against? This is not one of those times where you get to flip it back to us and say, no, voters, you do it. We did. We voted for you. Do your job.
This is a question from Chris Hoffman, who asks, has the city committed to stop the practice of selling confiscated weapons? If not, why not?
The city of Seattle has. Other departments haven't, but the city of Seattle has. Good. And I think they should. Many people may not know, I was a U.S. attorney. I was a federal prosecutor. And we looked at this issue across different law enforcement agencies. And again, it's going to come down to, I think, a state law is going to have to require it, because police agencies who are there to protect the public should not be making money by putting more guns onto the street. I just think it's the wrong thing. And I want to go back. I think you guys, we are so happy that you guys are doing a march. I don't want to, the school superintendent people won't like it, but I'm glad you're walking out of your classrooms. And then you've got to keep the pressure on. I mean, it makes no sense. If we can't ban assault weapons, it makes no sense whatsoever that you can't buy a beer until you're 21, but you can have an AR-15 that can shoot 20 bullets in a matter of seconds. It makes no sense, and our lawmakers need to change the law.
So this is a question from Catherine. What kind of outreach is the city doing to marginalized communities affected by gun violence? What kind of outreach should be occurring, especially to youth?
We are doing as much as we can. It's one reason why I know Carmen. And we have had, look, I said this before, I think that in the last 4 to 6 years, the city went the wrong direction. We started being top-down in a lot of ways. And I think when you talk about violence, it's got to be community-based. and you have to empower the communities to get it right. And so we are reaching out to community-based organizations in every part of the city, whether it's White Center or whether it's White Center's not our city yet, but whether it's the Duwamish, whether it's the Duwamish, Rainier Beach, Lake City, you name it, and because there are strong partners. We're going through a process right now where we're going to be working with the different community-based organizations that work on youth violence prevention to say, okay, what are the ways we can empower you more and have clear markers on whether it's working and give you the best evidence we have, whether it's from the health professionals like Dr. Rivera or things that are happening in other states and other communities. But we know that youth respond best if they're supported and led by their communities. That's just a fact. It's not going to be a mayor walk in and say, hey, this is what you should be doing. They're all going to look at me like they're looking at me right now. They want, we've got to empower community base. So we're doing extensive outreach. We are going to be doing more. The city council has been a full partner in this. And we will make sure as a city that we continue to try to work with communities because we know what works. We know what works. We just haven't had the will to do it on a consistent basis.
I'm sorry.
That's fair.
I just wanted to hear from Gregory, who's part of the Youth for Peace project. What do you think would help?
I actually just wanted to touch on what the mayor said. The solution is really going to come from inside out. Like the strength is going to come from inside these communities. Resources need to be pumped into these communities. There needs to be people on the ground that are helping these problems out because that's the only thing that's going to show any real change. We need, once again, after school programs, before school programs. You need to be able to eat when you get to school a good amount of meals because how are you going to make logical decisions if you can't even eat? There are so many simple things that just need to be instituted in order for us to just not be as alone. Because that's why people shoot. People shoot because you feel alone. You shoot because you feel afraid. You shoot because you're trying to make a change in an environment that you don't feel like you have control over. We just need to add some degree of control.
We have, I think this is an awesome question from Ross Parker, and not just because of his awesome name. Mm-hmm. He says, we know the NRA spends $17 million a year in schools to teach kids to use guns. How does any school district have plans to teach the true facts of gun violence and the history of the Second Amendment? And if not, why? I wouldn't think this would necessarily be a middle school curriculum, but do you know of any classroom work that is done informing youth about gun violence and the history?
I would say no. I don't know. Now, do our schools talk about the Second Amendment? Do they talk about the First Amendment? Do they discuss that? Absolutely. Specifically the history, I think it's happening in pockets with courageous educators. I do not think it is part of traditional curriculum.
Why do they have to be courageous to do
That's
that?
a really good question. It's a, and I'll say this, and I stick my neck out there a little bit as a leader of a school to be here saying that we need to make change, because the question is, you're a leader of our school, you're making this political. And I'm sorry, I'm done with that. This is not about politics. This is about humanity. This is about kids. This is about safety. And that's that. And even saying that, there's a worry in that, and where our teachers get that barrage too if they broach some of these subjects. We're at a place in our world where we are telling educators don't get political, but yet we're politicizing everything about our kids and the world that they're in. And so students, ask those questions. When you're in your government class, when you're in your history class, are you asking those questions and saying, what are we really talking about here? And when we're talking about this Second Amendment, here's how this is impacting my life, and can we really discuss what the Second Amendment was when it was created and how times have changed?
the NRA would like us to teach you how to handle guns, but they really don't want us to teach you is that having a gun and access to a gun is actually going to increase the threat to your life. That's what we really should be teaching the kids.
That is such a true statement. When you have a gun, you find a reason to use a gun. Otherwise, why do you have it? It was a waste of money. Horrible investment. Honestly. I don't really have anything else.
All right. This is another question for Dr. Rivera. Based on your research, and I know you touched on this earlier, but based on your research, what policies are effective at reducing gun violence and which local policies are actually making it worse?
Safe storage does work. We know from studies done here in Seattle that safe storage of guns will reduce the risk of accidental shootings and suicides and assault with guns among youth by about 85%. So safe storage really does work. Tony Gomez is here from the Health Department. The Health Department with Seattle Children's and Harborview have been pushing safe storage of guns in conjunction with sporting goods stores around the state. That really does work. I think that the issues that the Alliance for Gun Responsibility has done, universal background checks does work. That's really been a big step forward, trying to get rid of the gun show loopholes. You may not realize that there are federally licensed gun dealers. If you go to a gun dealer, you have to have a background check. But in other states, you can go to a gun show, and I can sell you a gun without any paperwork changing hands. I could be a criminal. You could be a criminal. It doesn't matter. That gun could change hands without any paperwork. The universal background check bill that we have here in the state really does make a difference. It prevents that from happening. And then our extreme risk protection order law that went into effect, the initiative that went into effect, it really allows you and I as family members to go to a judge and say, my loved one is mentally ill, or my loved one is having a lot of problems right now. He has guns. He has an AR-15. He has guns. That judge can then take those guns away from that individual temporarily until that person gets the kind of help that they need. Those kind of laws would make a big difference. That should have happened in Parkland, Florida, with those individuals to take the guns away from that mentally ill youth. That would have made a difference. Those are the laws that we have here in the state that really are effective.
What would you say to part two of the question, which is which local policies are not working or making it worse?
Well, I think the local policy of being able to buy guns when you're 18 is a problem. Being able to buy a AR-15 when you're 18 is a problem. And if you remember the Mukilteo shooting a couple of years ago, the young man there was 19 years of age, and he went to a gun store to buy a handgun. He was 19. You have to be 21 to buy a handgun. So instead, the dealer sold him an AR-15. And he killed a number of people in a party among kids your age up there in Mukilteo. That policy does not work.
Another thing I'd like to comment on is the fact that guns can be sort of a currency in some of these neighborhoods, and so often they have value, and so oftentimes they're changing hands. And so there needs to be something to get those guns off the street, because honestly, I'm not personally like tied to any gang or anything, but I've at least 3 times in my life in the past 2 years had opened up my story and had someone asking who's trying to buy a hot gun. What else are you going to do with it? You're going to try and sell it to get it away from you, or you're going to throw it in the river. There's really no other way to dispose of it. There needs to be a program in order for you to dispose of it properly.
Tell the grown-ups what your story means when you open up your story.
So your story is like your feed. People, messages from people, your peers, people that might be friends of a friend, social media, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, yeah.
On behalf of grown-ups, thank you.
We got this question from Zachary, who says, how, as students who can't vote yet, can we make change? And what can our city government do to support, sponsor, and defend students' opinions?
Well, I think you're seeing some of it right here by being here, by talking out, by walking out, and by marching, and then by not being done. Because we've seen, unfortunately, in the history of our country, where we've had these types of events, people tend to get energized, and then somehow they lose focus. And then we're brought back together when another tragedy occurs. And so this needs sustained energies, and you've got those sustained energies. And so that's what I say, and the city will support you. We will push, we will do what we can to empower youth and give you a voice. We'll do everything we can as adults to make you safe in your neighborhoods, in your homes, and in your schools. And then you have got to pick up the mantle too, and you've done it. And you've done it in a way that hasn't happened in many, many years. It's a change. You have changed the dialogue. Youth have changed it. And I am so thankful that you have. And I just want to encourage you to keep it up, challenge us, push us, and as we've said, make sure that you hold adults accountable. Make sure you hold your elected leaders accountable. You don't have to vote to do that. You all have student newspapers. You all have email. You all have the ability to make your voice heard. Make it be heard.
I just wanted to add something to that, though, but I want to talk a little bit, too, about you young folks on the street level. You guys have a choice. You have choices. You have to make the right choice. You know what they are. And I know it's hard out there, but you've got to want to live your life and be productive and successful. And you know the people that are around you that are doing that are drawing you in. You have to make better choices. You have to find outlets. The city is committed, as I'm hearing, to, hopefully get us some more resources, opportunities for youth. But you have to take advantage of that when they come your way. It's very tragic to continue the cycle. I see it a lot, cycle after cycle after cycle in the same groups of individuals. And you have to learn. The hardest thing that you're gonna say in your life is the word no, and you have to start using that. You have a lot of people, adults, caring adults. I mean, look around you. You have politicians, you have doctors, you have SP, you have a lot of people. You have mentors that are here to help you. So utilize us. Say the word no. Get onto the right path. Become successful in whatever you want to do, because I don't want to attend another funeral anytime soon. I went to Dallas's and just cried my eyes out, and it didn't have to be that way. You've got to learn to say no. And I'm talking, we're talking schools and whatnot, but I'm talking especially to you guys that I mentioned to you. You're on the street level, and it's dangerous out there. But how do you get away from that? Start asking yourself that question now. Or if you have a friend or somebody, how do you start getting away from that? You've got to become, I see so much potential in many of you. I saw so much potential in Dallas.
And to report about their peers. Parents don't understand or don't know how SPD handles violent threats. So how do you improve this education?
We were just talking about that with some of the students backstage on that. I think it's a really good point and a really good question, and it's one where I want to work with the school district and private schools and with parents' organizations so everybody knows where to go, and it's a safe place to go. Because you hear a bunch of different things. One, who do I tell? Do I trust them? I don't want to get that person in trouble. All those range of things go. So we need to make it okay to say, you know what, he brought a gun to school. That's not cool. Or he's making threats and I think he means it. And be able to get that person the help and take away that threat in a way that is immediate. We've had that in schools here in Seattle where students went to people and it wasn't taken as seriously as maybe it should have. in Parkland, you couldn't have had more flares and red flags about that student. So I think that's a really good question. It's one that we in the city will work with the schools and work with parents and communities so everyone knows where to go and feels that it's safe. The other thing I want to go back to what you said is, I think that right now when you're teenagers, the strongest influence on teenagers is probably their peers and their friends. You care more about what your friends think about you or the people you want to be your friends than you care about any of us adults sitting up here. And so one thing I would urge you is kind of think about how do you make it as uncool to have a gun as it would be uncool to have like a calculator sticking out of your pocket, you know? So that when the person walks up, it's not like, oh man, let me see it, or wow, where'd you get it, or can you get me one? It's like, that's stupid. And that's a shift that we've got to do to figure out how the peers can bring that pressure to say, you know what, I've gone to too many funerals. I don't want to see that happen again.
And another piece of that, we talk a lot about gun violence and the shootings because they make the news. But as Dr. Rivera mentioned, what doesn't get talked about enough is suicide and the access that students have. When you look at survivors of suicide attempts, the majority will say, don't try again, and are glad that they survived. However, when suicide is attempted with a gun, it is far more fatal. And so, while we're talking now about some of the bigger, scary school shootings, we need to figure out a way also to make sure that all of our students, all of our parents, all of our educators continue to be aware of the signs of suicidal ideation and know when and how to report, and to never assume that someone was just joking or just sad. And to the adults out there, that includes making sure in your house, if you have a weapon that is unsecured and you have a child in your house, you're complicit. Stop it. Store that weapon safely now.
We have come to the end of the time for the public program, although there'll be a chance to mingle afterwards.
I actually have one more.
Go ahead.
Please.
I asked the mayor behind scenes, but I would like to publicly invite her to this Youth for Peace event that we're having in April. I already said I promised you a t-shirt and everything. So yeah, you'll be fully initiated.
Could we give a big hand for our panel this evening? And as I mentioned, they will be around afterwards if you'd like to talk to them one-on-one. Also, our guests, Lisa Herbold from the City Council, Chief of Police is here, Carmen Best, Public Health Director Patty Hayes, Dr. Larry Nyland, who's Superintendent of Public Schools, School Board President Leslie Harris, who you heard from a little bit earlier, and King Council Member Joe McDermott. So feel free to mingle with these folks and ask them questions.
Councilmember Gonzalez came in as well.
Oh, Councilmember Gonzalez also. They're here to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Can I also give a shout out to all of the people that came here and convinced me to do this on stage?
Thank you for being such a great audience. A big round of applause. Another big round of applause for all the panelists and for yourselves. Thank you for being here on a Thursday night.